My name is Lacey, and that day, at 26, I was simply standing in the stuffy, crowded bus station. All around me there was hubbub and bustle, and my gaze fell on him, an elderly man. He was feverishly fingering the meager coins in his trembling hand, and it was clear from his face he was short of the required amount, just a tad. My heart sank. I couldn't bear to see this. I walked over and handed the missing money to the conductor, a seemingly ordinary gesture of humanity. He turned around, and instead of gratitude, I saw a wild, animal fear in his eyes. He leaned so close that I felt his whisper, cold as a blade, penetrate me to the bone. When your sister leaves, don't touch the lipstick she gave you. That's it. He turned and disappeared into the bus, leaving me alone in a daze, my heart pounding. I felt like I was in a daze the whole evening, and when I got home, I almost felt around in the bottom of my purse for that very gift, that very metal tube, cold and ominous. I pulled it out, and the world swam before my eyes. It wasn't just lipstick, it was a message, or a weapon. I realized it wasn't an accident. But before you find out what darkness lurked in that velvety shade, do one simple thing for me. If you're with me, if you care, support me with a like and a subscription, and share your city in the comments. It's so important for me to know where you're hearing me from now. And it all started so beautifully. Just 2 days earlier, my sister Macy's fiery red car roared to a halt beneath our windows. She emerged, all designer glamour, with a Hollywood star smile and a small box wrapped in silk. "Lacey, darling!" Her voice sounded like honey. "This is for you, an exclusive shade. I created it myself in the lab to match your skin tone. Try it on at the launch party. You'll be the belle of the ball." I melted then. Macy, successful, brilliant, had noticed me. Without the caustic jokes, without that eternal superiority, she had given me a piece of her luxurious life. How blind I had been. Returning to the silence of my apartment, I clutched that ill-fated lipstick in my palm. Now it felt unbearably heavy. The joy had evaporated, replaced by a sticky, nauseating fear. The fear in that old man's eyes. My own sister. No, I had to check. I had to. With trembling fingers, I removed the golden cap. The crimson heart of the lipstick stared at me like a pupil. I looked around. On the table sat a vase of snow-white roses, perfect guinea pigs. With a sinking heart, I pressed the wax skewer to the most delicate petal and drew a thick crimson line. I pulled back and waited. I paced the room, muttering under my breath, "Nonsense, Lacey, paranoia. It's Macy, sister, blood." The minutes dragged on in silence. I almost convinced myself I'd lost my mind for no apparent reason. Almost. I waited at least an hour, 2. But the reaction came so quickly that despair washed over me instantly. Less than 30 minutes had passed before the rose began to die before my eyes. Those perfect white petals, they weren't just wilting, they were turning black. It was as if an invisible acid fire were burning them from the inside. They wrinkled, curled, turning into something ugly and dark, as if touched by death itself. And that smell, God, it wasn't the scent of a wilted flower. It reeked of a chemical fire, scorched plastic, a hellish laboratory. Nothing in common with the delicate scent of a rose, or even cosmetics. I bit my fist to keep from screaming, because the image that pierced my mind was unbearable. My lips, my mouth, this instead of my skin. My heart would simply burst with horror. And at that very moment, as the last petal blackened, my phone shuddered and lit up on the table. Macy. I was wrenched from my stupor. I grabbed the phone. I needed to hear her voice, right now. "Lacey?" Her voice sounded unnaturally high-pitched, without any hello. "So, have you tried it yet? I can't wait to see how this shade looks on you." There was no concern or curiosity in her words. It was a greedy, impatient expectation, as if she were waiting for a signal that she had caught her prey. I'm just changing, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. I'll definitely apply it right before I go out, I promised. We quickly ended the conversation. I was afraid she'd detect the panic in my every breath. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely dial the only person I could confide this nightmare to, my friend Chloe. Chloe, you won't believe. I told her everything, haltingly, in one breath. She listened silently, and when I finished, her voice was collected and firm. That's enough. This isn't a sisterly squabble anymore, Lace. This is criminal. I have a friend, a chemical expert, Dr. Evans. He works in a private lab. I'll call him and persuade him to see us today. Take this thing there. The next morning, I was driving to the suburbs. The sky over Des Moines was covered in a thick, milky fog, as if nature itself was hiding what I was about to discover. I didn't sleep a minute. That black flower kept flashing before my eyes. The lab turned out to be a nondescript brick building. Dr. Evans, a man with intelligent, wary eyes, was already waiting for me. Without another word, I handed him the clear Ziploc bag into which, wearing rubber gloves, I'd packed the ill-fated tube. He took the bag and examined it carefully through the plastic, without opening it. The wax has changed texture and color at the tip, he quietly stated. And the smell, I can smell it even through the bag. It's not cosmetic, it's something else. He looked at me, and in his gaze I saw not idle curiosity, but professional concern. I'll make this a priority. What you've seen is enough to ring all the alarm bells. I thanked him, feeling the lump of fear in my throat give way to a small spark of hope. At least someone was taking me seriously. I walked out of the building, and a cold fog embraced me, creeping under my coat. I was almost to my car when my gaze fell on the guard booth by the main gate, and I froze. There he sat behind the glass, the same old man from the bus station, in a guard's uniform. He wasn't hiding. He looked straight at me, and there was no fear in his gaze. There was a tired, bitter determination. He was waiting for me. My heart pounded, and my legs carried me to him as if of their own accord. Answers. Now I was ready to do anything, just to get answers. I walked right up to the booth. He slowly, as if every movement was effortful, opened the window. I began, but my voice faded. I knew you'd come here, he said quietly. His voice was hoarse, exhausted. This is the only place in the city where they can analyze such a substance, unofficially. Why? I breathed out. Why did you tell me that then? What do you know about my sister? What is this? He looked past me into the gray haze of fog, and his face twisted in pain. I didn't want to interfere, but I couldn't keep silent again. My daughter had a friend, just as bright, just as trusting. She also got a lipstick, an exclusive one, from a promising young brand. An icy hand squeezed my throat. What happened to her? She went crazy, he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. Not right away, a month later. Neuralgia, psychosis, like her brain was melting. The doctors found nothing. They chalked it up to stress. She committed suicide. And the one who gave her, the one who was like a sister, she patented a new long-lasting pigment a week after her funeral, based on a unique formula. The world around me swam. Macy's? The Macy's brand? Mace Cosmetics? The old man nodded, his lips pressed into a white line. I couldn't prove anything, but I recognized her face. I recognized her methods. And when I saw you, so alive, I saw Lisa in you, my daughter, and I couldn't pass you by. He reached out and took my hand. His fingers were cold and rough. You have to be smarter. She's your blood, but she has no heart. Run, before it's too late. A sharp radio crackled from the booth. He winced, released my hand, and abruptly closed the window, becoming a simple guard once more. The conversation was over. I stood in the piercing wind, his words ringing in my head louder than any scream. Run. But where? And most importantly, from whom? From my own sister, who seemed less a sister and more a monster in a designer dress. My gaze fell on the plastic badge on his chest. Mr. Henderson. A name. Now this ghost from the bus station had a name. His face, deeply lined, was like a map of suffering, a life lived, full of silent observation and, I was sure, regret. He nodded silently, solemnly, as I approached, and gestured to a blind spot between the surveillance cameras, a narrow passage between the wall and the van. We stood there, in the damp shadows. He sighed heavily, and that sigh seemed to lift from the depths all the dust and pain of the past years. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low, a subterranean, echoing whisper. I worked for 5 years, baby. 5 long years as a night watchman at Pharmagenome. That's the same pharmaceutical company where your sister Macy started, before her glamorous brand. And I saw, he paused, gathering his strength, I saw what she did when night fell on the city and she was alone in the labs. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't utter a sound, afraid to frighten this revelation. He continued, his eyes looking not at me, but somewhere inside, into the past. She sat there, at her desk, mixing some liquids, powders, no reports, no clearances, alone, like an alchemist in her own crypt. But one incident, I still dream about one incident. He licked his dry lips. There was a girl there, Alicia, young, smart, beautiful, a darling. She and your sister started out together, but Alicia was chosen for a big project, the very one Macy had dreamed of. And then, after that, Macy was transformed, became her best friend. And then, a week later, she gave her a jar of cream. She said it was her own secret to eternal youth, the most precious thing to a friend. Alicia beamed with happiness. She started using it every day. The old man's voice wavered and took on a painful hoarseness. 2 weeks later, on her face, God, it was terrible. Not pimples, but red, oozing blisters, as if she'd been burned with acid. She screamed in pain. The dermatologist shrugged, saying it was a rare allergy, some kind of asthma. She was fired, of course. Who wants to see a face like that? She was gone. And Macy, he smiled bitterly, Macy calmly took her place on that very project. I later found empty ampules in her trash can, unmarked. But I was just a caretaker. Who would listen to me against a promising scientist? I shook. A bitter lump rose in my throat. The picture was so monstrous, so elaborate, that my brain refused to believe it. But I had to ask, to crush my last hope. You mean to say, my own voice sounded alien, flat, that she deliberately poisoned her? For the job? Mr. Henderson looked at me. His old eyes held a bottomless sadness and a strange relief, as if he had finally exhaled a stone that had been weighing on his chest for years. Exactly so, my child. And when I saw you yesterday with that lipstick, I recognized the signature. She doesn't change. She can't stand it when someone shines next to her, especially when that someone is her own sister. I stepped back, leaning my back against the icy metal of my car. The world swayed. The fog around me thickened, turning into a white, viscous canvas, hiding a monster. My sister. My blood. Not just jealous, not just a careerist. She was a predator, cold-blooded, methodical. And now I was her prey. A warm, rough hand fell on my shoulder. But this time, Mr. Henderson said quietly but firmly, we have a chance. We have evidence. And we have you, safe and sound. We can stop her before she does the same to you. He was right. Running wasn't an option. It would only delay things. Macy won't stop. She'll chase any light that dares eclipse her own. And I've lived in her shadow for too long to let it consume me now. I straightened up. I clenched my fists to keep them from shaking. Thank you, Mr. Henderson, for everything. For your courage. I got into the car and slammed the door. The silence of the car deafened me. I placed my hands on the steering wheel and closed my eyes for a second. The fear hadn't gone away. It was there, cold and clammy. But something new was growing on top of it. Furious, determined. The battle for my life, for my face, for the very right to be myself. It had only just begun, and I wasn't going to back down. At precisely noon, the ringing of my phone shattered the silence. I sat on the edge of the couch, paralyzed, staring at one spot for hours, awaiting the verdict. I grabbed the phone with the feeling that not just my life, but my very existence depended on this call. Only it could confirm or dispel this nightmare. "Hello?" My voice sounded like the creak of a rusty door. The silence on the line was deliberate, intentional. He had stepped out to speak privately. And immediately, without preamble, he struck me with the truth. "Lacey," his voice was harsh, but there was something like restrained rage in it. "Remember once and for all, not a single molecule of this substance should touch your skin. Ever." I froze. The ground beneath me began to shift. "It contains extreme concentrations of acid and mercury," he continued, each word hitting like a hammer. "But the most monstrous thing isn't the poison itself. It's how it's programmed." He paused as if gathering the strength to utter this abomination. "It's not designed for immediate action. It's not cyanide. It's a slow solvent. It reacts with the proteins in your skin and causes necrosis, irreversible necrosis. If you had applied this to your lips, within an hour, your mouth would have been, sorry, Lacey, melted, non-viable tissue. No surgery could have fixed that, ever." I vomited. Right there, on the carpet. Spasms gripped my stomach as I choked on emptiness and horror. Melted tissue, a gift from my sister, wrapped in tissue paper. I mumbled something into the phone. "Thank you. Oh, God. I don't know what." I put the phone down. It immediately came to life again, not with a call, but with a message. The name on the screen burned like a brand. Macy. I opened it with shaking, tear-stained fingers. "Little sister, don't you dare be late tomorrow. And remember my gift. Put on some better makeup. You're supposed to be the brightest." A smiley face, a little sunshine. I looked at those words, and something inside me finally broke, went out. That last warm ember of my sister's childhood life died. It was blown out by the icy wind of that sadistic mockery. She knew. She was anticipating. She didn't just want to hurt me. She wanted me to hurt myself, with my own hands. She wanted me to come to her glamorous party and in front of everyone, under the flashing lights of the cameras, begin to transform into a monster. So she could look me in the eyes at the moment when the pain became unbearable. So she could savor my destruction as the ultimate triumph. And then, through the panic and nausea, an icy needle of clarity pierced. The police? Now? She'll turn everything around. She'll say, "Oh my God, a batch defect. What a terrible coincidence. But I love her." Her parents will believe her. Everyone will believe the brilliant Macy, not the eternal little sister Lacey, who dramatizes everything. No, that can't be it. The truth must be a fiery letter, seared into the forehead of a lie. So blatant that it's impossible to turn away from it. So, I need to give her what she expects. I need to make her believe I'm wearing her lipstick. I need to make her bare her fangs, thinking she's won. I need everyone to see her true face. The game is just beginning, but now I'll be the one dictating the rules. I got up from the couch. I didn't just rise. I shook off that trembling fear like old, worn leather. Something inside me snapped. The fear didn't disappear, no. It transformed into something else, a cold, honed determination. I grabbed my keys and purse and walked out, slamming the door. I had one goal, and I knew the way. I arrived at Stage Effects, a theatrical prop store in the old neighborhood, a place that sold fake snow, wigs, and believable suffering. The air smelled of dust and rubber. I walked past the aisles of costumes, past glass eyes and false noses, straight to the special effects department. There, on the shelves, lay boxes labeled realistic burns, deep cuts, traumatic makeup. My fingers found what I needed: a professional liquid latex kit, a palette of scar waxes, and a small bottle of type 5 blood, the thickest and darkest. I picked it all up and carried it to the checkout. The clerk, an elderly man with the tired eyes of an artist, glanced at my purchases, then at my face. He didn't ask any questions. He simply scanned the items slowly. "Good luck," was all he said in a low voice, handing over the bag. He understood everything. He understood that sometimes the most terrifying performances aren't performed on stage. That same night, the Marriott Hotel shone like a crystalline mountain. It bathed the entire block in a blinding false light, a symbol of everything Macy had achieved. I stepped out of the taxi, the light blinding my eyes. I wore a simple black dress, a frame for the main exhibit. I adjusted the blue surgical mask, pressing it tightly to my face. Beneath it lay not an illness, but a death sentence. I inhaled deeply. The air was cold and sharp. There was no turning back. The revolving doors pulled me into another world, a world of warm light, the clinking of crystal, the hum of voices, and the rich aroma of money and perfume. The banquet hall was bursting with Des Moines elite, and all this splendor died down, frozen, when I appeared at the threshold. Silence rolled over me like a wave. Whispers, surprised glances, quick as needles. What is this? Who is this? Why the mask? I walked slowly, my head down, letting everyone see this anomaly. The flashes of the reporters' cameras at the buffet blinded me. I felt less like a person and more like an exhibit just carried into the ballroom. And then I saw her. Macy, in a silver dress that shimmered like mercury. She shone in the center of the circle of important people, but her smile, that perfect, rehearsed mask, wavered for a split second. Her eyes met mine. Something swift flashed in them. Panic? No, not panic. Anticipation. She rushed across the room toward me, weaving between the guests with an unnatural, ostentatious swiftness. Everyone was watching. She ran up and grabbed me by the shoulders. Her grip was too tenacious, too strong. It was a grab, not an embrace. "Lacey!" Her voice was deliberately loud, with a tremor intended for the front row. "Oh my God, what's wrong with you? Why are you wearing a mask?" In her eyes, so close, I finally saw it. A spark. That very spark of cold, boundless triumph. She thought her plan had worked. She thought her victory lay hidden beneath that mask. I looked at her, and the tears that welled up in my eyes were real, because the pain of her betrayal burned deeper than any acid. I didn't say a word. Slowly, as if in slow motion, I raised my hands to my face and grabbed the elastic bands of my mask. The room was so silent, you could have heard a crystal pendant fall from the chandelier. I pulled off my mask. There was a collective, muffled gasp of horror. What they saw was disgusting. My lips were swollen, deformed, covered in crimson blisters that seemed to be oozing blood. The artificial sores and peeling skin looked so realistic that several people in the front row twitched with nausea. Camera flashes crackled like machine gun fire, picking out this disfigured face from the darkness, a face that should have glowed. Macy raised her hands to her mouth, a perfect, rehearsed mime of fear. She would have won an Oscar. But she didn't rush to block me from the cameras. Instead, she took a barely noticeable step back, exposing me to the rays of light, giving the crowd and the press the best angle, so that everyone could absorb my ugliness, so that against it, her beauty would soar to the heavens. "Oh my God!" Her voice, shrill and loud, cut through the whispers. Tears, where did she get them from, rolled down her perfect cheekbones. "Are you allergic? I told you to be careful with seafood. How could this happen?" And there are our parents. They pushed their way through the crowd, their faces contorted with panic. When Mom saw me, she let out a sound that would make even strangers' hearts clench, a short, guttural cry of utter maternal despair. She stepped toward me, her hand trembling in the air, hesitant to touch. "Lacey, my baby," her voice broke into sobs. She grabbed her father's hand, who stood deathly pale, pointing at the phone with trembling fingers. "An ambulance! We have to call an ambulance! Now!" I knew time was running out. They would take me away, and she would remain here, pure and innocent. No way. I let my legs give way. It was as if a wave of pain washed over me and washed away all my strength. I collapsed onto Macy, forcing her to support me. I clutched her hand with such force as if I were drowning. "Macy," I whispered hoarsely, forcing her to bend over. My breathing became rapid, ragged. "Take me to the bathroom, please. I can't. I don't want them all looking at me." Her eyes flashed. Something akin to interest flickered in them, a desire to steal her prey out of sight, to finish her performance in silence. "Of course, sis, of course," she whispered with false tenderness. "Hold on to me." 10 minutes later, the heavy oak door to the VIP lounge slammed shut with a soft but final click. The hum of the party became a muted, distant rumble, as if we were sealed in a sarcophagus. The air here was cold, sterile, and smelled of expensive soap and fear. We were alone, two sisters. I stood leaning against the velvet sofa, still clutching my hand to my chest, feigning a spasm. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. She waited. I waited. We both knew the masquerade was over. Something real was about to begin. Macy immediately released her grip, as if my hand were a hot iron, and abruptly pushed me away. I flew back against the wall, my shoulder hitting the carved wooden panel. The caring sister who had been sobbing in the room had vanished. The face before me was alien, smooth, cold, and frighteningly calm. She indifferently adjusted a crease in her silver dress, the gesture chillingly ordinary, and turned to me. A thin, satisfied smile played on her lips. She leisurely walked to the minibar and poured herself a glass of water with ice cubes ringing like bells. She took a sip. Only then did she turn around, her gaze sliding over my disfigured face with such triumph that a chill ran down my spine. "Well, look at you now." Her voice was quiet, sweet, and venomous. "Pathetic. Your modeling career is over, Lacey. Forever." I slowly straightened up. The pain I'd been feigning had faded from my posture. I stood up, pushing myself away from the wall, and looked her straight in the eyes. Calmly, so calmly that her smile faltered for a moment. "Why, Macy?" My voice rang out firmly and clearly, cutting through the silence of the room. "Why did you want to destroy me with that lipstick?" She threw her head back and laughed. It wasn't laughter, but a heart-rending, hysterical shriek that sent shivers down my spine. She took a step forward, and in her eyes, something that had been building for years finally burst forth. A black, tarry hatred. "Stolen!" she cried, breaking into a scream. "You've spent your whole life stealing what should have been mine. Attention, admiration, love, with your false, innocent puppy dog look. I'm talented. I'm a genius. And you, just a pretty face. And now you don't even have that face." Every word struck me, but didn't hurt. It merely buried the last vestiges of illusion. My sister was gone. Without taking my eyes off her, I reached for my small purse. I pulled out a pack of makeup remover wipes. I unzipped it with a crisp click. Macy fell silent. Her eyes narrowed, confusion flashed in them, and then the first timid spark of animal fear. I pressed the cold, lotion-soaked wipe to my lips and swiped. Once. A thick crimson smear crept across the white fabric. 2. The oozing ulcers began to smear. 3. With each movement, smooth, clean, unharmed skin was revealed. I peeled all that theatrical horror from my face and tossed the bloody wipe at her feet. I stood before her, completely normal, whole. Macy recoiled as if a ghost had appeared before her. The color drained from her face, leaving a deathly pallor. Her eyes darted wildly from my perfect lips to the dirty napkin on the floor. What? Her voice was barely audible, a croak. What did you didn't, you lied. You didn't use her. She trembled, gripped by the panicked, all-consuming terror of her entire plan collapsing. I didn't respond. I had nothing to say to this monster. Instead, I slowly raised my hand and pointed at the wall behind her, at the large, blade-thin television screen, which until that moment had been black. Now there she was, in crystal-clear, high definition, her pale, terror-contorted face, and my calm reflection beside her. I spoke the last words quietly, coldly, and utterly mercilessly, looking not at her, but at her image on the screen. Look there, Macy. This entire heartfelt conversation is being broadcast live. The entire banquet hall can see it right now. Your every word, your every smile. The door to the lounge slammed open, as if it had been battered by a battering ram. The tense silence inside shattered, mixing with the resounding hum of the room. My parents were the first to burst in. Her father's face was ashen. He looked like he'd just been electrocuted. His gaze, full of disbelief and icy horror, was glued to Macy. He took a step, then another, staggering as if the floor were giving way beneath his feet. His hand trembled at his hip, clenching and unclenching into a fist. How? His voice broke, becoming hoarse and alien. How could you? Your own sister, your own blood. What did we teach you, Macy? What? Macy's mouth opened. A sound, the beginning of a lie, escaped her lips, but it was immediately drowned out by heavy, precise footsteps. The police. They entered swiftly and silently, like a well-oiled machine. They surrounded her, cutting off all access. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed in the room, dry and final, like the snap of a trap slamming shut. And then she exploded. She twitched, shook, and thrashed hysterically, like a wild, cornered animal. She struggled, her perfect hairdo falling apart, her silver dress crumpling in the officer's hands. "It's her fault!" Her scream was piercing, filled with fierce, inhuman hatred. She spat out the words, looking at me over my parents' heads. Her eyes were two embers of hellfire, promising vengeance. "She deserved it all. None of you understand. None of you. I've always been in the shadow of this doll." Not a drop of remorse, only venom, only malice. The officers, ignoring her screams, turned her around and led her to the door. Leaving the lounge, they found themselves in the complete, deathly silence of the banquet hall. A procession of shame. She stumbled, handcuffed, past the very people whose favor she so desperately desired. Investors, editors, socialites. They flinched, turned away, stared with such icy contempt that it seemed the air would freeze. Everything she'd built over the years, her reputation, her career, her image, had crumbled to dust in those 5 minutes, turned into a pathetic, filthy farce. I stood in the doorway, watching her life crumble, and I felt nothing but icy emptiness. Suddenly, a soft touch on my hand. I turned around. It was Mom. Her face was blurred by tears, her eyes swollen with grief. She silently pulled me to her, holding me so tightly, as if she were afraid I would disappear. Her body shook with silent sobs. "Forgive me," she breathed into my shoulder, her voice broken, filled with endless shame. "Forgive me, daughter. I was blind. I didn't see the monster in my own daughter. I almost lost you." She cried, and I stood there, staring into the void above her, and I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Ever. I hugged my mother, looking out the huge windows behind her. Down below, in the hotel driveway, blue and red lights flickered. These restless flashes reflected on the shocked faces of the guests inside, coloring them now frosty blue, now an anxious crimson. I watched as the officers roughly, yet casually, placed Macy in the back seat of the police car. The door slammed with a dull, final thud. Her fate was sealed behind that tinted glass. And relief washed over me. Deep, all-pervasive. No more gifts, no more flinching at the sound of its engine. But then, like an icy stream, a bitter, aching grief rose from the very depths. After all, that departing car was taking with it the last fragments of our family. I had saved face, saved my life, but I paid for it with the complete collapse of sisterhood, that fragile bond I had once cherished so much. 3 months later, the first timid snowflakes were falling on Des Moines. They settled on the gray asphalt, trying to envelop the city in a clean, forgetful blanket. The air stung my cheeks as I walked out of the courthouse for the last time. A heavy, strange mixture filled my chest, the stone of despair and the emptiness of liberation. Macy stood before the judge. Her shoulders trembled slightly beneath the faceless prison jumpsuit, so alien to her glamorous world. The sentence was read in deathly silence. 10 years. For attempted grievous bodily harm, for possession of dangerous substances. A high price for blind, poisonous envy. The judge spoke of calculation, of violating family trust, of the need to protect society. I watched her being led away. All that remained was a shell, eaten away from within by her own hatred. Returning to that very apartment was impossible. Every corner screamed betrayal. I put it up for sale. I couldn't sleep within the walls where I had almost become its victim. I spent the next weeks packing my life before into cardboard boxes and sealing them with tape. I chose a quiet neighborhood on the other side of town where the shadows of the past knew no address. Starting from scratch was scary, but necessary. I needed a place where I could learn to breathe again without looking over my shoulder. But there was one important matter before leaving. I went to the Central bus station, the very same one. He was sitting on the same bench, Mr. Henderson, in the same shabby coat. When he saw me, his eyes widened. I approached him, no longer like a frightened girl, but like someone who had weathered a storm. "Mr. Henderson," I said quietly, sitting down next to him. I placed the thick convergence in his hands. It contained a significant portion of my savings. "Take it, please." He tried to push it away, muttering a refusal. No, baby, I don't need it." "Take it." My words were soft, but unambiguous. "You must retire. Don't stand in this cold any longer. You've stood here long enough." He looked at the convergence, then at me. There was moisture in his old eyes. "Thank you," I said, my voice shaking. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be here, in every sense of the word." We said goodbye under the softly falling snow. Two strangers, forever bound by one terrible secret and one well-timed word. With our parents, we learn, slowly and painfully. The wounds Macy inflicted are deep. We still gather for Sunday dinners, but now there's always one empty chair at the table. It stands like a silent, heavy monument to our tragedy. Our conversations are cautious, often interrupted by long, painful pauses, but we hold on to each other. And we are grateful. Grateful that we still have this table, and that I can still sit at it, alive, unharmed, with an undamaged face, looking into the future, no matter how difficult it may be. This painful experience has taught me something terrible and important. Envy is the most dangerous poison. Not because it kills its victim, but because it slowly, irreversibly corrodes the very vessel that holds it from within. Macy allowed this acid to consume everything: our shared history, our sisterly bond, her conscience. In the end, only one monstrous need remained: to destroy the one she was supposed to protect, the one who was a part of her. And I realized something else. Trust that tingle on the back of your neck. Always. Even if it whispers about the person closest to you. We so often silence this inner voice for the sake of politeness, for the sake of peace, for a false sense of duty. I'm embarrassed to appear suspicious. I don't want conflict. She's family. But that voice isn't paranoia. It's an ancient, life-saving instinct, a survival mechanism that screams when the mind refuses to believe. I almost ignored it. and it would have cost me face, and perhaps even life. And finally, justice. It exists. It's not just a word from law textbooks. It's an immutable law waiting for its moment. You can build the most ingenious traps, wear the most impeccable mask, play a role flawlessly. But the truth is like water. It will find the slightest crack. It will leak through and collapse the entire dam of lies, demanding retribution. No calculation, even the most brilliant, can account for the power of this simple, inconvenient truth. My dears, those who have been with me all these months, listening, worrying, writing words of support, a huge, endless thank you. Your comments, your stories, they gave me strength when it seemed like the world had collapsed. If my story has made you think, even for a second, listen to yourself, reconsider some relationships, share it in the comments. I read every message, sincerely. For me, these are more than just lines on a screen. If you think this message about self-trust is important, please support the channel. Subscribe, share this video with a friend, sister, or mom. Perhaps this story will save someone from trouble. Perhaps it will simply remind you that your inner voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for being with me. You are my support.